Goeiemôre landbouvriende. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a privilege. The last day of Nampo is finally here. Everybody's worked to bits. But we thought that it might be interesting to have a conversation around insurance. So this year has been a pretty tough one. El Nino has hit us, and it was like a real typical El Nino year. Stopped raining on the 6th of January, and it was very much here and there. Could never say exactly where the drought was, but farmers were under severe pressure, which is leading to severe financial pressure in certain areas, and some of the exhibitors can also feel it. The farmers don't have as much money available as normal. That brings us to the question for today, guys. Agriculture is well known that you have good seasons and you have bad seasons. Now, how do you survive a bad season? You know, when it doesn't rain, when you're over there in Lichtenburg or around the south of Delmas, what do you do now? Where do you go next? And what can you do to prepare better for the future? So around the panel today, we've got the Vice Chair of Grain South Africa, Jeremiah Mathebula. They're from Ermelo. We've got Daniel Stevens heading up agriculture at Santam. He's a specialist insurer, has seen many dimensions of insurance, from the normal household and home through to very specific and unique kinds of insurance, to share his perspectives with us. Somebody that's well known in agriculture, Gerard Diedericks. Not only is he a board member at Agri SA, he's also, for his sins, he's also a farmer far up in the north. He can tell us all about how to survive without any water whatsoever. But mostly he's one of my mentors in insurance. He's a veritable library, the Wikipedia of insurance, where I grew up in the insurance industry. So Gerard, you're most welcome. Pascal Sipugo, CEO of Land Bank Insurance Company, joining us today. Land Bank Insurance Company being a very important player in the landscape nowadays, and we're excited to see what we're going to have. And Mr. Nkangwe Rameshi, Chief Director of Development Finance at Department of Agricultural, Land Reform and Rural Development, DELRAD. Let's do it. DELRAD's much easier. Gents, welcome. Thank you very much. Jeremiah, farming is tough. How do you see insurance, or, what's the need really? What's it like being a farmer out there? Doesn't rain. What are the plans that you need to make? How does one survive? What's going through your mind?
Thank you very much, CE, for the introduction. It's, farming, it's a very, very difficult area where we work in. So if you are a farmer, you need to plan ahead. And it's not that easy, but I'm happy that today we are discussing the issue of insurance with our team here. We got El Nino that has stricken the farmers very hard this year. And every time the climate change all the time. So sometimes you got good rains, you got flooding, you got drought, and then the yield get affected. And that's where we need to mitigate the risk. And how we do that, we need to have insurance, and so that we can mitigate and try to reduce that risk. Because once you don't plan ahead and you don't have that kind of protection as a farmer, one drought that will hit you or one El Nino that will hit you, you are out of business immediately. So to come back, it's a very, very difficult situation. So I think, especially on the developing space, developing farmers, we are having a serious challenge there, because there's a track record that is needed. If you are, especially for the guys that are already in the commercial space, commercial farmers, they've been there, they got all the records. With the insurance, they need all that records to make sure that your soil, it got that potential, and you can be covered for the multi-peril insurance. But for the developing farmers, it's very difficult for those farmers to get into that space. They only get covered for fire and hail, of which when it comes to drought situation that the farmer cannot control, beyond the farmer's control, it becomes a very serious situation. So we need a solution that will assist the developing farmers in that space to get covered, but also even on the commercial space. multi-peril risk, and how do we go forward in terms of making sure that we get our farmers sustainable, profitable, and we protect that income so that we can produce food for our country.
Thanks, Jeremiah. It's very much about surviving till the next season, to try out the next season and start planting again. Now, Gerard and Daniel, being insurers a long time in the industry, the question would be, maybe let's start off with what can insurance do? Where does an insurance product fit in? Where doesn't it fit in? Sometimes we call it a grudge purchase. What's your thinking? Where do you see insurance fitting in? Maybe Daniel can hit off and Gerard can...
Yeah, maybe Gerard, if I can just start before you, is just because we're sitting in the line as well. Right. I think, and the point that was made now, just around MPCI, I mean, from an insurance perspective, you've got to look at where the demand is. And
MPCI being?
The MPCI, multi-peril crop insurance, is very, it's small in South Africa from an insurance, crop insurance perspective. That's about, in the region of about 4% of our total insurance premium. The balance being, our product covers effectively hail, locust damage, frost, and some other small elements as well. And then the multi-peril crop insurance covers that, plus this covers drought and excess rain or flood. And as you can imagine, the drought is a systemic risk, so it doesn't just affect one farm or a small area. It's a very widespread risk. So from an insurance perspective, the risk is just too high. I mean, you can close the doors of an insurer through multi-peril crop insurance. If you look around globally for MPCI, and I'll just refer to MPCI from now on, is if you look at the US, Canada as well, India, China, all multi-peril crop insurance is subsidized. In the US, it's subsidized between 80 and 90%. So it becomes affordable for the farmer. And I think in South Africa, if I read some of the documentation that the state has put forward, there are plans for a type of subsidy for that type of insurance, which I think is very positive for the industry and positive for farmers, big and small farmers.
We're going to head in that direction just now, because I really want to ask the question, guys. So what are the plans and what do we need to have in place? But you mentioned that multi-peril systemic, it can take an insurer down. What kind of business would an insurance company take on, and what wouldn't they take on? Where do you play? What can you offer farmers?
Yeah. Well, at the moment, and I'll move on to Gerard, but the last thing I'll mention is we offer hail cover. South Africa is a hail-prone country, except for parts in the Western Cape. The rest of the country really experience big hail. Areas like the Free State, which wipes out crops, and we insure predominantly wheat, maize, sunflower, soybeans. Those are the main commodities. That makes up about 80% of the commodities. Although we do insure about 40 different types of commodities, but the ones that I've mentioned make up the majority.
So you could see that our insurers are quite comfortable once we talk about something specific. When the word multi comes in it, it becomes complex and systemic. Gerard, insurance, your perspective, also being a farmer, nowadays an advisor and a consultant, how do you see what works for farmers, what doesn't work for farmers? What do we need to have in place?
Tobias, thanks for inviting and being here. But if I can go a little bit back, the PPP is a terminology quite used often this last couple of years. But actually the finding or the need to find the solution is actually coming over 20 years now. But since 2019, I think the momentum picked up, and I think all the role players is actively involved. But we have to go and say that in the private sector, you use capital, you have to have capital in terms of the Insurance Act, and you need to service that capital.
Yeah.
And insurance is two sides of the same coin. When the insurer wants to sell, the client doesn't want to buy because the needs are different or the expectations. And when the insurer doesn't want to sell, in the El Nino phase for argument's sake, the farmer wants to buy. So a couple of factors that we need to say what from an insurer's perspective is that they don't want anti-selection. You can't just insure when you need it. Your caravan risk to have an accident is most probably in December, but they allow you to pay over 12 months, so it's fairly cheap. So you can't only insure in El Nino cycles, you need to insure in La Nina as well.
So that's getting enough money into the pot
To pay for that year where they can wipe you out.
Yeah.
The second thing is the accumulation of risk. So like Daniel mentioned, the weather type of conditions is climatic, is systemic of nature. It's widespread. It's not in bands per se, it's a whole region. And you have to contribute consistently to have that premium to pay out that 200-300% loss ratio in a specific bad year. From a client's perspective, you want it as cost-effective as possible. It's influenced by the commodity price of the produce that they do, and sometimes there's just not enough a percentage left to pay a 5 or an 8 or a 10% insurance premium. And I think the purpose of the discussion today is what is the industry doing with the public sector to say what type of solution can we put there. And
the two of you mentioned something there, because you just got to the prices, the 5, the 7, the 8, and the Americans that are subsidized to a high degree and elsewhere. How do you get to the 5, 7, 8%? I mean, what determines that? And you've touched now on that we do need support. It's expensive for a farmer, but you know.
Yeah, Tobias, I think there we get to the crunch of it. At the end of the day, in simple terms, it's how much do you pay out over a certain period of time and how much premium you earn. If that doesn't balance out to service the capital, there's corrective measures that kicked in, either higher excess or a higher premium, etc. And we need to get as much as possible people in, because the basis of insurance is predominantly the many pay for the few. So if only the few participate, then we sit with challenges. But if over time many people contribute, then it's easier to have it at a stable level. And I think that is where we are now, in the sense that from the public sector side, positive engagement with National Treasury, Prudential Authority, Delrat, and all the insurance company represented by SAIA. And there was documents submitted. It was sort of studied, and questions were asked. And they allowed one of the members of SAIA to, in the intergovernmental...
That's being the Insurance Association.
The South African
So
Insurance Association of South Africa.
Yeah.
So they allowed the pilot because parametrics index insurance is excluded in the Insurance Act, and they allowed us to not be considered as transgressing the Act. You do it in a controlled environment where all the regulatory bodies was present, and that was submitted. And the documentation came back, and I think in the next round, Daniel will explain a little bit in terms of that. But there's a good correlation. The insurer that did it on behalf of the industry focused on the soil moisture index, which you can measure in a very cost-effective way, in the sense that to put somebody in a car to drive 100 kilometers to go and do assessment to see if there's a claim. Now you can do it virtually, electronically, much more cost-effective, but in that, there's a challenge in the sense that insurance is an indemnity policy, where parametrics, you might get paid and you haven't had the loss, or you might not get paid and you have a loss, because it's geographical areas that's pulled together to determine if there was a deviation of the long-term average, if I can call it like that.
Okay, cool. I just want to take a step back. So there's two kinds of insurance, the indemnity and then the parametric. So indemnity, Daniel, that's what you described. It's a hail insurance with a multi-peril. So it happens to you and it's specific and you paid it out. Now this parametric insurance is a new concept. It's not provided for in the legal structure that we're currently working in. How does parametric work? You mentioned soil moistures, or what is parametric insurance? How does it work, basically? So I'm putting the two, I'm grilling the two insurers here.
Maybe just, and Gerard can, provide his view as well, is essentially from a parametric insurance is also referred to as index insurance. So it essentially measures the lack of soil moisture or excess soil moisture based on an index. And I don't want to, I'll mention maybe the pilot, but you use satellites in order to measure the soil moisture. We've got so many satellites that are watching us, and one of the things that they, can measure is the level of soil moisture. And in terms of the indemnity and the parametric, indemnity is we trying to, from an insurance perspective, put the client back into the position they were before the loss. So you do that by sending out an assessor to do the loss assessment, loss adjustment, and then agree quantum. On the parametric side, as Gerard mentioned, it's an index. And because the index covers a certain portion of area, it will also overlap with farmers. So if that specific area, the index says that a claim is triggered because there's excess soil moisture, the area will then trigger the claim. So all farmers in that area will receive a claim. But not all farmers in that area would have had the same amount of damage. Some would have had more water, some would have had less water. And that's where the terminology of basis risk comes in, which again was mentioned. So you're not indemnifying somebody that potentially could have had a claim as a result of the excess water.
Okay, so you look at an average index, and sometimes you'll be short and sometimes you'll be over. And this is why you bring in the whole government and subsidization, or the whole. You need to apply it to the prudential authorities to allow you to do this. So what's happened there?
Just to add to what you've mentioned now, Tobias, is because in terms of this, let's call it innovative in South Africa, you still need to treat the customer fairly. You still need to comply with all those rules. And the purpose of the pilot was to say, can this policy adhere to that principles? So the indemnity side is still the uncertain side, and the prudential authority is still investigating that with other countries. The subsidy is the big thing. We're one of the few countries that's got no subsidy, in which the discussion is underway to say, how can we subsidize so that at least the client or the producer can be in a position to at least replant next year at the end of the day.
Okay. Nkongwe, you've been sitting from the department looking at these guys developing products and saying that there's money necessary. What is your view? Maybe just step back from government. How do you see these kind of products, services to farmers? What's the general thinking and the direction that you've got before we dive into the meat of things?
Okay, thanks. I think from the government side, we have realized this quite a while back. And after that realization, I think we were also honest in terms of saying, we don't have the skills in the department, but we decided to collaborate with the World Bank. I think they've done more work in terms of insurance in different continents. Then we also working in collaboration with SAIA, which is the Insurance Association. And then we were also working with our National Treasury and other role players. Now, I think the big issue, or what we have done so far, is we do have a proposal on the table. And the proposal is saying that we do need insurance, and we're looking at the different quantums of the farmers, from the smallholder farmer to your commercial farmer. And I think based on our history and affordability, I think There is the proposal suggests some subsidies that should be done. I think this is also based on.
Is this coming from government side or is World Bank say? What's the World Bank saying? Because they're looking at all the countries and they're coming here and what's their position, or more or less?
Okay, I think what the World Bank, the advice that they gave to us was that I think we as a country, I think we are falling behind because other different countries and continents, even in Africa, I think they've already started implementing this insurance, and I think they are also making subsidies available. So I think the challenge that we have now is that we are aware of the situation. I think when you speak with people who are actually working in the sector, they will tell you that the premiums are quite high. Not only high for the developing farmers, but also to some extent the commercial farmers as well.
So the farmers are finding it difficult to pay and the insurers are nervous. And that's why you need to come in from a government side to subsidize and to get everybody to insure. Yeah.
Yes, that is correct.
Cool. And you're now at is it the piloting phase or is it testing phase? What are we piloting and testing at the moment?
Now the pilot is completed.
Yeah.
The outcome was submitted to the Intergovernmental FinTech Working Group, and government has studied that, and in principle it has been approved. From the SAIA member side, they now each need to apply in terms of their license to be able to sell that product, while we give government the chance to find the money to subsidize the process. So the administration process can start now applying to do index insurance.
Yeah, maybe just to add on to what Gerard is saying, we from a Santam perspective, we've applied to the Prudential Authority. We've had quite a few meetings with them as well in terms of our application. The one application has been approved. That is to provide index insurance in Angola. So we're busy with a project in Angola with the International Finance Corporation, which is the finance arm of the World Bank. And then the South African element, we've also put in a business case to the Prudential Authority. We met with them last week or 2 weeks ago, the 8th of May, and we're expecting feedback from them quite soon. I'm hoping, obviously, it's going to be positive, but the communications that we've seen in the last few days from this team as well is that all things are looking positive. I just want to say also that I can understand from a government point of view that this is not an easy road to take. And even though it's taken a long time to get, I think, where we are, the last couple of years has been moving, I think, at a faster pace. But at the end of the day, the farmer or the client at the end of the day needs to have or be offered something of value. And I think that's where we all agree. So the time is the time, but it's not an easy road to take. But I think we're on the right path.
Thanks, Daniel. And I'll ask about that again in a little bit. So the product's been approved. You're actually doing it in Angola already. And we're looking at the subsidy side of things. And Pascal, Land Bank Insurance Company, obviously you look at different elements within the bank, not only at the crop side of things, but what's the perspective? How do you see the environment? Where do you think we're going with this?
No, thank you. My colleagues have touched on this a bit in terms of where the process is. And when we started, Mr. Matebula did articulate very clearly the challenges. There isn't a product out there that's sufficiently fit for purpose to help farmers sustain their enterprises. So as industry, I think that's something we own. But we do also believe in the power of public-private partnerships, that we, as industry, we can't do this alone. We'll never have sufficient capital to go into a volatile business that is crop insurance. So that is where I think collaboration with government comes in. The World Bank had a conference some time back, and they called on most of the countries in Africa around disaster risk and insurance. And it was about 14 countries, 13 of which provide index insurance, subsidized.
Those African countries? Or?
African countries. Everyone from Kenya being the biggest, Zambia, Rwanda, Somalia, and in Southern Africa as well. It was a very interesting statistic came out. In Kenya, last year in 2023, they issued 3.3 million policies to smallholders, index insurance, which covers both the livestock and on the crop side, either soil moisture or area yield. So it does show that perhaps we've been a little slower off the mark than perhaps our counterparts in Africa. And the World Bank's view is very clear. We are not a poor country, so they are not going to provide donor funding. They will provide the case studies and business cases of what we need to do, and they leave that manual with government to say this is how you implement. Elsewhere in Africa, they do support with donor funding, which is perhaps what helps governments to provide subsidies. In Kenya, for instance, between 40% and 80% subsidies. So that really helps farmers, but it also helps with the take-up. So the numbers that I referenced, 3.3 million smallholders, I think that's quite remarkable. And they've been running these programs the last 6-7 years. So I think while as a country we've been slow off the mark, I think the progress is there, we can see it. And I think we need to just continue to focus on how we do this as a public-private partnership. From a land bank perspective, we see our role as one of pulling the stakeholders together. And of course, we can be trusted with public money because we are a public entity. But we can never envisage a situation where we do this alone. It's working with stakeholders in the industry. Sometimes has got deep experience in the area, and such other stakeholders.
The partners in this public-private partnership, who's going to do what? How will this work?
So clearly, government has got a big role to play in terms of policy, making sure that there's a policy framework that can support this. So that's quite key.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the small matter of providing those subsidies, potentially into a fund that could be run by any one of the government insurance entities like a land bank or a SASRIA. Those are set up to do that. And behind that will be a panel of all the other insurance companies that have got the appetite to support this. And then, of course, reinsurance companies. So we've seen these models work right throughout the world, where the private-public partnerships work, but government has got to create the policy framework for this to happen. And I think there's goodwill. We see that there are policy positions that they're articulating to support farmers in this way. So there is good progress from what we can see.
I think, Pascal, thanks for what you're saying. I think one needs to appreciate the initiative that you guys have started, especially with our government. I think the developing farmers, including the commercial farmers, one will appreciate what we have started because insurance, mitigating the risk, it's the premium are so high. And not only the premium on insurance, there's a lot of the input cost that comes in, and they also very high. Farming business in particular, everything has become so premium for the developing farmers to afford. I think the farmers will have a good smile because we've been engaging on this topic for quite some time. At least now there's progress being approved in principle, but I think we are in a good space because subsidizing this will assist the farmers at least to be sustainable and profitable.
Yes, if I can just make a comment in terms of that, and it's always easier to see what the other guy can do. But if we look at subsidized insurance premiums, there will be less pressure on other support that government need to give the emerging farmer. I mean, somebody need to pay for it after a disaster, if it's a disaster fund, etc. And I think it's looking carefully at the budget to see how do we reallocate, but with that, there's a lot of risk that's currently in the government space that will move then to private sector to say, but okay, make it worth the mathematical calculation.
I think this is speaking a little bit to the different sources of money. So there's a disaster management provisions, and then there's the general support. So, I mean, there are different sources Treasury can maybe give from different pockets. Where are you asking, and what are the potential sources? How are we thinking and talking about this?
Okay, thanks. I think the issue of budget in this current climate is quite not easy, because I think all government departments have been given an order to say, you know, there's not going to be any new money. I think instead of budgets increasing, they are decreasing at this stage. But I think
we have to be more clever with our money.
Yes. So I think the idea is to say, look at what you currently have, and then reprioritize, and then if, you know, because I think from my side, I think insurance is quite critical, because for farmers, because you are looking at food security. You know, government is also big on pushing smallholder farmers, because I think in Africa, you know, smallholder farmers are the ones in other countries who are really producing more. But I think in South Africa, it's the other way around. So the only way you can make these smallholders sustainable as a government policy is to really support them, so that their businesses can be sustainable. Now, some other people will say, no, but you know, there is a disaster, so how do you fit in? Well, if you look at how disaster works currently, you know, it has to be declared, and I think most of the time it takes quite a while for the farmers to relieve, to get the funds. And I think it mostly concentrates on the infrastructure that is damaged. And here, what we are coming up with is to say, well, we know for a farmer to be able to produce, well, you need infrastructure, but the other thing is what happens to the crops. If there is damage to the crops, either because of drought or too much rain, how do you put the farmer in a way that he can be able to sustain himself and also be able to produce in the next season?
Yes, at the moment, if there's a disaster or there's a big flood or a drought, we would apply to government to support this and say, Minister, please make money available, and then the money gets distributed somehow to the farmers. How would this be different? Well, how do you see it being different? I don't know. Who wanna...
I will try to make a stab at it. At the end of the day, that process is quite lengthy, because you need to wait to declare the disaster. Where on the insurance side, if the occurrence happen, then the payment is quite soon after that. The parametrics index is different in the sense that you immediately know that there was a differentiation on the index, let's say trend line, and you can immediately engage with the farmer to say, but you can put your cattle now in your maize because you're going to get your payout. But on the traditional MPCI cover, you have to wait till harvest time to see what's the drop in yield. So the farmer can't put his cattle into his maize, because then he loses out on his policy. So I think there's a lot of benefits where you get a quicker payout sooner, so that you can make a business decision, what are you going to do with what's left. Where under the traditional insurance, you have to wait till harvest time. So I think.
That sounds nearly too good to be true. What's the downside?
Actually, there can't be a downside, because if we look at the agricultural sector, the public side or the private side of that, it's not only the SAIA members. But if the farmer go down, we don't sell tractors. If the farmer go down, we don't sell fertilizer. We don't sell seed. So I think we need to extend it to the input suppliers, to the agro processors, to say, what is the contribution that you guys can make? Maybe reduce, or say, if you've got the loss, we'll give a 10% discount of whatever seed and fertilizer you've purchased the previous season. So I think they still need a little bit of work to make the burden on one entity, not only the government. But it will start there to say, okay, we subsidize premiums, so the farmer can take out insurance, and then the whole of the agricultural value chain benefit from that. And I think there's more consistency in a model like that.
Pascal, yeah, you're going to have two products now that you can sell.
No, 100%. And it's got to be what is fit for purpose for an individual farmer, and working with their broker to advise them. But I just want to pick on the point that my colleagues have just made. It cannot be that we only look for government to drive this and to pump in money. There just isn't money. And I think the power of private-public partnerships can never be overestimated in this instance. In Kenya, for instance, the subsidy works on the basis that there's bundling. So the farmer has got to still also make an investment. And they would, for instance, say evidence of input, maybe fertilizers, maybe. So they've got those schemes where you get insurance subsidy, but you need to have done the following yourself. So they're not saying, as government, we're taking over your farm, Mr. Mathebula, that will provide you everything, will provide you free insurance. No, they're not saying that. They're saying, show us evidence of what investments you've made in input, and then the insurance is subsidized. So that way, each one in the value chain contributes something, and the outcome is that all of the benefits, and of course the social ills, fighting crime, unemployment, rural development, food security, and all of that. But it's a function of each one of us recognizing that this cannot only be government. Government is there to provide the framework and obviously support through subsidies to the extent that they can. But the rest of us have got to look at what contribution we can make to make this work for everyone.
Jeremiah, so what do you think will make it affordable? Because I'm hearing 20% and 90%.
It's so interesting. I would like to add on what T-Rex was saying. It's all about, I think, partnership. We are not also saying the government only must be involved, but government as the driver and the people that are making the policy for the country. The partnership will work. You go to the guys on the input side, the government will subsidize, and we as farmers, we also invest into the business. We also invest money into the business. So in order for us to make it sustainable and profitable, partnering with all the guys involved in the value chain, I think it will determine the calculation as to where it will be affordable for the farmer. So I'm looking at the input guys. They can also give us better prices on their input side. And then the government will, if they subsidize a certain portion of the total insurance, it will really assist the farmer, because at the moment we are not getting any subsidy. It's from the farmers' pockets. So that's why it makes it so difficult.
Daniel, now, will the two products cannibalize each other? How do you think? I mean, it's all guesswork now, but once you get into the market, do you think which one will the farmers prefer? Will we get subsidies on both? Are we only going to do the one or the other one? Or how do you see this going forward practically for farmers?
Are you
And
referring
which one should a farmer choose? I know you're not a broker, and I'm putting you on the spot there a little bit.
to the MPC
But fortunately, it doesn't. The one product doesn't exist yet, so we'll hide the recording in future somewhere. But you can see that.
Yeah.
But you can see the two different products: MPCI or parametric.
Okay. Yeah, I certainly think that they can coexist. The main difference will be in terms of how the assessment is done, as we've mentioned. On the MPCI, because it's an indemnity product, it will be different to using the satellite in order to determine the payout. And yeah,
on the MPCI, somebody will come there and say, "This is exactly the damage. You harvested 10, you were supposed to harvest 20.
Yeah.
here's the amount. On the satellite, it'll be
It'll
based
be a
on an
set.
average and an algorithm, a calculation, really.
Well, it'll be based on a set sum insured per farmer and paid out as a percentage of, wherever the trigger, wherever the trigger goes, not the trigger, but the index moves. So certainly, and I think that just coupled to the hail insurance as well, each one has a different purpose. And again, just on at a global level, they exist. They exist alongside each other. And again, if I just use US as an example, there's MPCI, there's index, and there's hail cover. The hail cover is your traditional insurance cover, which is bought as it is here. Currently, and if I can just use our example that we've had this season in an El Nino, and we know El Nino is a dry season. We offer the product on a very, call it, selective basis. We also underwrite this, so we need to make sure that we mitigate our risk. But even during this season, I mean, our loss ratio is 190% on that MPCI product because of the drought. So that's where the subsidization levels need to be considered. And even if one looks at the parametric product, remember that is also covering drought and it's also covering excess rain. So it's essentially a different type of MPCI product. The peril is exactly the same. The design of the product is different, but the peril is exactly the same. So yes, I mean, to answer your question, they certainly can coexist.
Gerard, now, you're now retired from the industry and a farmer yourself. How do you think
what
about
Daniel
this?
has said is, when your farm is getting smaller than a certain size, the costs play a major part in determining the price.
Yeah.
So for the smaller farmer, if we don't use technology to determine that, even if it might be a 1 or a 2% inaccurate because it's not the indemnity, the good thing about it is the subsidies and the documentation that I've seen also talk about subsidies for the commercial farmer and the MPCI policy, which is also a climatic condition. So I don't think the two products will compete, because for a farmer, black or white, farming on 1,000 hectares with maize, the MPCI will always be the better option, because it's worth your while. The cost is lower to go and determine the loss that the client experienced. But to travel 200 kilometers to do 4 hectares of maize, a claims assessment, the price will just become more unaffordable. So I think that is what the Prudential Authority need to determine, to say, this mistake that we make in terms of indemnifying the client versus the price increase if we want to do it accurately. There we'll have to make a regulatory business decision to say, it's the best as possible that's available. It's working on an international basis. Pascal has mentioned some numbers. And once you've got volume, it doesn't happen all across the country at the same time, but geographically it can influence. And if we get that consistent participation, the multitude that take part, then you sort of even out to get to a more basic premium that's affordable with this government subsidy. I mean, there's countries that go as high as 70 for all. Kansas, America, that insurance company, there's various participants in a co-insurance model, but the negative of it, if there is not maize or the people can't replant, is food security. It's the prices of food is increasingly. The wrong people get penalized in the sense that I can't afford. Government subsidies at that level isn't enough anymore. So it's investing your rand on the one side, you get a rand benefit. But investing a rand in insurance, you get at least a multiple of 10. So it's always a good mathematical decision to say insurance is a good horse to bet on.
So it's quite interesting. Thanks for that, Gerard. I told you that you're going to give us these insights. But Jeremiah, what I'm hearing is there's two products very much for different parts of the farming. Obviously, there's overlaps. Pascal, in Land Bank, the new mandate, well, let's call it the more focused mandate, There must be a number of discussions going on. How do we support the commercial farmers? How do we support the smaller, new commercial farmers? Is that discussion also happening with the bank, between Land Bank Insurance and Land Bank, the bank? How do you, or is it, what are the guys saying? I'm curious.
No, 100%. So I think as Land Bank Insurance Company, will continue to support the commercial farmer the way we've been over these years. That's important to support food security and to keep the commercial farmers on the farm, because behind that commercial farmer is farm workers. So the more you invest in supporting commercial farmers, it's a no-brainer that you continue to contribute to towards improving employment and employment opportunities, and then of course growing the economy.
Yeah.
You know, our contribution to GDP is not insignificant if you look at the full value chain. So as Land Bank Insurance will continue to do that, but we also embrace the challenge to support development.
Yeah.
And we think it's a function of two things. One is fit for purpose products, and I think we focused a lot on this today on index insurance. But the other one is the distribution mechanism. How do we enable a smallholder or a development farmer to access advice? That's quite a big thing that we find. So quite aside from product relevance, we've got to be thinking as industry around how we make products and advice available to the farmer. So as Land Bank Insurance, and I'm sure our industry colleagues sometime have been doing the same, is to create a pool of black insurance brokers, crop brokers. And it's quite a big thing that, because other than just identifying them, you have to train them, you have to support them, you have to mentor them. You have to create opportunities for them to engage with farmers so they can get opportunity to quote. So we think that way, ultimately for the industry, it is the right thing to do, that we create a crop of black brokers who are resident close to where our farmers are. If you are a farmer in Ermelo, you cannot be expected to access advice from a big broker in the Western Cape. It can't happen. So you need somebody who understands your language, who can come and explain the terms and conditions of the policy in a language that you can understand. He sits with you on the farm, and he can give you detailed, proper advice. So I would say that quite aside from the product, I think as industry we have to really think about how we support the new era farmer to access the advice so they can make the right informed decisions.
So it's a whole system that we need to buy. Gents, I'm going to ask for closing, to make your final statements. I'm going to do the rounds while you're thinking about that. And you also look after development finance. It's a bigger portfolio. What are the other things that you're doing? How does this fit in terms of what you're, just by way of curiosity? Because I'm sure my vice chair here will also be thinking, what development finance, what is it farmers need it? What is government doing and moving in that space?
Okay, I think broadly speaking, there are grants in the department. These are 100% grants. And then besides that, we also have a small, a lending scheme called Mafisa. It's just that at this stage we are not really taking new applications. We are reviewing it at the moment, but it's a loan scheme that was offering loans more specifically to smallholder farmers at subsidized rates. Mm-hmm. Then we are now talking about insurance. I think the idea now is to include this also in the portfolio. But I think in the bigger scheme of things in the department, I think we talk now about the National Producer Support Policy. I think this is now trying to encompass all the support that the farmer needs, because besides finance, the farmer needs extension, you need infrastructure, they need all these support services. And I think it has been proven that it is better, or it has better outcomes when all the support services are provided seamlessly. You know, because it doesn't help for a farmer to go and get a loan there, go and get a grant there, go and get some other piece there. I think what the farmer needs is support as a package. So
Especially when you're a smaller farmer and you have to do the ploughing as well.
Yes.
And well, big farmers nowadays also do their own ploughing, just with different size tractors, and you don't have time to run around from bank to broker to insurance company and the like to get all of this together.
Yes.
I'm going to ask Jeremiah to maybe lead the closing statements for us, but I'm the president recently lost his pen. We were quite surprised about that, but we were delighted when he found it again. But I'm actually asking the checkbook. Are we looking for one? I'm teasing. But we can get into that in the finance. I'm glad to hear that there are certain initiatives, well aware that money is tight. But I think there's a clear thing to point out that insurance plays a role. It's good to have all of the inputs, the extension offices, the markets. But insurance product really takes you on from the one season to the next one, so that we can continue doing the business. So I think it's a clear and an important priority for government going forward as well. Vice Chair, Grain South Africa.
Thanks so much. I think there's a few priorities that we need to take from our discussion here, looking at our government and also from the insurance side, and as Pascal has just alluded on some other issues. It's very important that we focus on this insurance so that everyone will benefit. You know, the insurance need to make money. As farmers, we also need to make money. And I would like to take this to the government side in terms of the subsidy and the development finance side. We need to. There's a lot that needs to be done for the developing space, in terms of the infrastructure and developing those farmers to make them profitable and sustainable. On the insurance part, I like what Pascal is saying. The training, and that they're going to offer some broker that will be closer to the farmers, because if I'm a farmer in Ermelo and I'm going to wait for someone that is coming in Bloemfontein to come and do an assessment, it takes about 3-4 weeks. Maybe the farmer can replant once the assessment is concluded, or whatever the case might be, but the efficiency and effectiveness and understanding of how the insurance works, I think that needs to be driven hard so that the farmers can get exposed and are able to make an informed decision. I think it's so important that when we do this development of the developing of the developing farmers, there's still a lot that needs to be done, and let's work on it. Let's all partner on it so that we can make informed decision as to where we're going. The direction is that we all now realize the need of subsidizing the insurance, because it's so expensive to take that cover as a farmer. So if we can all collaborate and partner and making sure that we work together to achieve the objective, I think that will take our country to the next level, and the farmers out there will be also at ease and stay on the farm. We appreciate that we have already identified that need. We've been engaging on this issue, and we're looking forward as Grand South Africa to get more of the stakeholders and to work together on this issue.
Daniel Santam, new products, new horizons.
Yeah, I think we at it's an exciting time to be. I think with even the discussion that we're having here around parametric insurance, it's not something which was, it didn't just come about on its own. There's a lot of work that's gone in the last few years. And parametric insurance, again, I don't think it's the be all and end all. I think it's in addition to what's already there. And I think the intention from all the role players there's good intention. And from an indemnity perspective, or call it a pure insurance perspective, we do insure quite a lot of emerging black farmers using our normal current channels. We've got very sophisticated co-ops that have many small black farmers that they are supporting. Even here at Nampo, we've engaged with some of them in some of the work that's being done, but there's always a lot more that can be done. From a Santam perspective, last year we trained about 250 small farmers in insurance and financial management, because a lot of them may not also need help with just insurance, but the whole financial management aspect and where insurance fits into everything. So that work is also taking place. I think we do need to also look at what the other countries are doing. And from our company perspective, we're working with Zimbabwe as well. There's many smallholder farmers there. Currently, as it stands, we're insuring 600 smallholder farmers there on an indemnity basis. So things are possible.
Yeah.
And you can do assessments on those farms just given the location and the fact that, we work through a meso structure, which is essentially a contractor which manages those individual farms. And we've got that structure in South Africa as well. So yeah, very, very excited. I think it's the place to be is in agriculture. And specifically agricultural insurance, and I think with the buy-in from the role players, which I think is great, we can certainly make a difference for the consumer at the end of the day.
Thanks, Daniel. Yeah. Gerard, you've got a privileged position, inside of agricultural leadership, intimate knowledge of farming, intimate knowledge of insurance. Wise words for us going forward.
Tobias, I think in terms of what the Vice President mentioned, is all those was tested in the pilot. The training side, the understanding of it, what am I buying, is it performing in terms of what I was expected? So that was covered. I think we shouldn't only look at government. At the end of the day, the banks want collateral if they finance you. In terms of the National Credit Act, they're not allowed to do reckless lending. But they're sitting millions of CSI funding, out of which they can be a support to government to subsidize some of the premiums on the projects that they finance. So I think if you want to put a nice value chain together, we will be positively surprised as to where we can find more money the moment a small-scale farmer or a commercial farmer want to go to a bank to get access to capital. And insurance is one of the collateral. I mean, if we look at the difference from a different perspective, I think in Knysna, the payout was over 5 billion. Knysna would have been gone if there wasn't insurance. But the brick makers, the wood makers, everybody benefit, and actually Knysna, after the disaster, there was positive movements there. And I think we need the government to start that initiative, and then the self-momentum will drive this thing that it's acceptable to everybody.
Gerard, thanks for that. And on a personal note, you've driven this thing for a long, long time. Please don't leave us. Keep the energy going. But if we get this thing off after how many years, nearly going on to 20 years now, there will certainly be a bottle of champagne to celebrate from the farmer's side. Pascal and Daniel. Pascal, you're going to take it going forward. Yes. How do you see us realizing this thing?
No, absolutely. I think it's just to leverage momentum. And the case studies that we've been exposed to is where this works best is where all the stakeholders, including the regulators, are part of the process of defining the future. In the World Bank conference that I referenced earlier is Kenya and Somalia, and I think Rwanda brought their regulators to be part of the conversations, to share with us what concessions they've had to make to accommodate this because they believed that it needed to be supported in the way that it should. So I think for us as industry working with the Department of Agriculture, perhaps National Treasury, is also to pull in all other relevant stakeholders and mobilize support. And as the Land Bank, we're very committed to supporting and driving that because these are our principles. So we've got more access to them because they're our colleagues. We sit alongside them in our offices. The last point that I wanted to make is as the Land Bank Insurance, we're also quite excited about the opportunity to change the face of South African agricultural insurance. And I think Daniel started making the point around how we contribute everything from the black brokers and also working with cooperatives, creating opportunities for smallholders to understand that farming is actually a business. It's one thing to invest your energy in the enterprise, but you also have to accept that it runs like a business. And I think as industry, opportunity for us to continue to invest in non-commercial farmers to understand that. The work that we've also started to do is to introduce black assessors, crop assessors. We think that that contribution is significant. It's necessary to ensure that, to the point that Mr. Mathebula made, you don't want to be waiting for a broker while if you're in Elmelo to come down from Bloemfontein. But at the same time, you also don't want to be waiting for an assessor to come from Cape Town to you. So we're investing in a process where we are inviting farmers, black farmers, to say, we will train you on crop assessments. We will provide you the mentorship. But that creates an additional revenue stream for you. We know that the business of farming is quite seasonal, there's downtime, and to the extent that farmers can acquire the skill, they can then use that skill to create an additional income and diversify the income of the enterprise. But it's work in progress. We know that crop assessments are very complex, they take time, but it helps if somebody understands already the art and science of crop farming. It's easier to train those to become assessors. The phase of crop assessments at the moment is non-transformed, and as the Land Bank would like to drive transformation to ensure that there's opportunities for black farmers to become assessors, and that way the person who's coming to do an assessment in Mr. Mathebula's farm is not coming from anywhere other than a farmer close to him who's his neighbor, who will do the assessment in the language that he understands and explain the terms and the conditions in the language that I understand. And I think that really, as industry, is something we have to embrace, to look at the full value chain and say, as insurance companies, yes, we're there perhaps to make a margin, but we're also there to make a contribution to the growth and development of the sector. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks, Pascal. We enjoy your leadership and we're looking forward to things to come. Kangwe, the last word from Dalrad. How do you see this partnership, the PPP?
Okay, well, we see the public-private partnership as a workable model, and I think since we started, we've had several discussions where we have looked at the different roles, the skills that are available, and based on the commitment that we see from the different stakeholders, I think, as soon as we will be able to unlock that seed capital, I think all the stakeholders are ready to move out there and implement this.
Thank you very much. You can certainly count on our support to unlock that seed capital. Guys, thank you very much for, it's a tough topic. There's large money and amounts at stake. Lots of thinking have gone into a very technical topic, and thanks for sharing your perspectives and making it clear to how it works and what it is all about. I've also asked, and I'm going to point into the audience here, a number of people participating, and even Andries. Andries has also been a leading light, worked very hard for a long time on this as well. It's not only Santam, Hollard, and they've been pushing, and I'm not going to mention another partner at this moment, but Andries has certainly in his personal capacity participated in SAHIA. But I don't know, are there other questions? Andries, you're also most welcome to make comments.
Chairperson, can I
Dr. Sandile, please.
Yes. Can I please allow my neighboring long-time friend farmer? He's been asking me very difficult questions, and I thought maybe I can pass them. But the first one for me, I think I picked up.
You can pass them to the panel, not to me, please.
Yeah, sorry. I picked up a couple of words that were key for me. The one was value to the farmer. You know, we need to sell value. The other was volume. We need the numbers to support the feasibility. And I think on the second one, I think it's really a critical part, because I've worked with so many farmers that when things get tough, like Mr. Mathebula said, they will cut insurance. And at the end of the season, they default on a serious loan, and they are totally out of business. So there is a lack of education and a lack of just appreciation of what is this insurance and what is the real value. But the other word that I also picked up on the conversation was really around the idea of the language and context. Because often, as soon as there is a difference in language and context, it's easy to accuse each other of the assessment is not fair, or the assessment is not, real. It's almost like a biased assessment. Whereas if the language and context has full appreciation of where I'm coming from and where you are coming from, we can possibly most probably find each other. But I think the last one is really to say, it seems that the most practical way to get insurance going in a viable way for the country, developing or commercial, is to get the volumes, is to get as much people as possible involved in the business in terms of taking up policies and managing a relationship with insurers. I will pass on to Mr. Sbia for his comments. Thank you.
Thanks, Doc. Mr. Sbia.
Okay, thank you very much. Ek weet nie hoe om te praat of
Afrikaans is reg.
of Zulu.
Daar gaan minder mense kan antwoord as jy Zulu praat.
Okay, maar jy weet mos dan jy voel iets binne kan by my hart. Ek kan nie regte praat van my ander language.
Gooi in Zulu.
Okay.
Jeremiah van homself.
Okay,
Afrikaans is reg.
dankie. Daai goed van insurance, baie mense verstaan nie mooi nie hoe werk die insurance. That is a point. Jy sien dan die hale is dan vandag, they vat 7 days, dan they come to do anything for my farm. The problem is, for example, I got 10 rand for my pocket. That 10 rand, I got insurance in my pocket. I go to buy input. That input, already you got your own insurance. I think I'm right or if I'm wrong. Number 3, I take that input to my field. No, I organize another insurance. That 10 rand, you got 3 insurance. What really insurance you work better to the farm? Thank you.
I don't know
Thank
if
you
you got
very
that
much.
one, that last one, maybe.
We're covered.
Which, yeah?
So his almost like these different types of products that are insured. You are insuring the crop. You are insuring the crop. You are insuring inputs. I think it's talking really to multi-peril versus things like hail and fire, because I think the interest is down to input insurance. Can you actually help me recover to the place where I should have been if I had not planted, technically?
Great. Thanks. Thanks, Doc.
Maybe just a
Daniel?
comment. Yeah, from an insurance perspective, again, a crop insurance perspective, the insurance you buy would be for the majority cases the value of the field. So if it's 1 hectare, if it's maize, you're planting what the tonnage you expect from the or the yield for that hectare multiplied by a price, and that price is either a SAFEX price or whatever. But it doesn't need to be that specific value. It can also be your choice in value, although the two should align and be very close to each other. And when it comes to the loss assessment portion, and here I'm going to refer mainly to hail damage because that's what we insure. We've got a farm in just outside of Bloemfontein, as well as 7 other areas around the country where we do loss assessment trials, or let's say hail damage trials. So we conduct those hail damage trials with the intention of determining how the crop reacts to the damage. Because in cropping, as you know, there's different stages. There's the vegetative stage, then there's the reproductive stage, and hail can fall at any stage. If it falls later, and it's the damage will be a lot higher than if it falls earlier in the vegetative stage, because in the vegetative stage it still has some time to recover, even though there will be there's highly likely that there will still be a loss because of the damage that took place at an earlier stage or mid stage of the plant. So from an insurance perspective, we test that. We also use different seed varieties on the various farms because they all act different to the damage that occurs. And it's hail simulation trials, and we do it, as I mentioned, in the different areas. And based on those trials, we've got loss assessment procedures which we update. We don't necessarily do it every single year, because sometimes you can have let's say hail on the farm that actually just wipes out the trial. And there's some benefit you can get from that, but for the most part, because these trials are controlled, they provide a certain outcome, and that gives input to our assessment procedures. And we've got assessment procedures for every single type of crop. And therefore, and I think it's Pascal that mentioned the assessment itself. That's the technical part of crop insurance that makes it a very specialized area of insurance. I'm not sure if I'm answering the question, but I'm just trying to give some context in terms of when there is damage on the farm. So the insurance you buy that we are selling, you're either going to get it through the broker, or if you're buying seed by a co-op, the co-op may ask you to take out insurance if you're taking a loan to buy the seeds or whatever the case may be. But it will be, your crop is essentially your collateral that providing a guarantee against that loan. And then the insurance part of it, if that crop is totally destroyed, you've at least got some insurance, and then revenue or a claim that you'll receive, which will compensate you for that loss that you've incurred.
I think just also to be specific on that question that has come out from Mr. Sibia there is that what we've been engaging on, and the reason why we're saying let's have subsidy on the insurance part, is the multi-peril insurance that we need. If you look at the climate change these days, this year you got floods, next year you got drought. there's El Nino, there's La Nino. It's volatile. It's very, very hectic for the farmers. That is why we've been engaging on the multi-peril insurance, because it covers the whole situations and outcomes of the climate change. So multi-peril is what we've been engaging on. That will assist, if there's a subsidy, it will assist us as farmers to meet us halfway in terms of the premium.
Excellent.
Can I just add just something quickly, just on the hail, because we must understand hail in South Africa is also a big role player. If you look at the last 3 years, we've paid out hundreds of millions of rands to farmers that have had hail damage, and that's again money that goes back into the system for that farmer to replant. And there, it's emerging farmers, it's big farmers, it's farmers across the board. So hail is a peril, but I agree, the multi-peril is an important one, but that's where the challenge comes in from a subsidy point of view, as you mentioned.
Yeah, that's where it becomes expensive and difficult. Andries, I think final question. We've got very little time left.
Chairperson, thank you very much for the opportunity. The question is, if we travel from A to B,
You're just getting another mic there.
if we assume that insurance is a vehicle for the farmer to make sure he arrives at sustainability, and he arrives at a point where he remains on the farm and he continues farming, because that's what we want. And it speaks to food security and a variety of other items. The reality of travel is that I can move from point A to B either in a very luxury German vehicle or in a very basic vehicle. And I think that perspective is also important. We do not have the luxury as a country to have this fancy does-all, do-all for everybody vehicle. Having said that, if we assume it's a basic vehicle, it does what it says on the box, it gets us from A to B, we have food security, we have farmers staying on farm. To what extent do input suppliers play into this, and to what extent have they been harnessed to be part of the solution? If it is a basic solution, surely the input players should also be part of this discussion if the intention is to remain on the farm as opposed to making a lot of money out of the process.
And members of the panel.
Maybe I will respond to that, Andries. There's definitely an appetite for the input suppliers to participate because they want to sell their inputs the next season as well. If it goes in a German car or if it goes on a normal car, it's there. But also on the agro-processing side, if the produce isn't there, their businesses is also. So I think if you take it all the spots a little bit and to add government's support to that and private sector, then I think the pressure on any individual link in this value chain will be much less. And then it will be becoming a self-fulfilling dream to have maybe a German car to get to the end point.
Thank you very much, Gerard. Ladies and gentlemen, Nampo 2024 has nearly reached an end. We're talking about technology. We're talking about satellites looking and supporting insurance products and processes. The sky is the limit. We look forward to having you here for the rest of the day. Please go and look at all of the other technology, all of the other exhibitors and their lovely products that they're offering us, and have a good time at Nampo Park. It was certainly a pleasure to have all of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.